Okay, well, welcome to another edition of Real Estate Investor Talk. We're sitting here in Claremont in Cape Town, and I'm sitting here with Jose Delgado. And Jose is a director of a company called iProtect, and they specialize in structuring trusts. They're a trust structural solutions company. So first of all, Jose, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Neil.
Jose, I think, for a lot of property investors out there, trusts is probably something which they're not quite sort of aware of. But before we get and start demystifying that, tell us a little bit about iProtect, what you do, and a little bit about the business.
Perfect, thanks, Neil. iProtect per se is a company that was formed a couple of years ago as a result of a need to actually support our legal firms. For about 11 odd years, we have focused exclusively on corporate commercial structures and obviously trust structuring, tax planning, estate planning.
Right.
And what we found is that many of our clients were setting up the structures, but come what may, people run into financial difficulties. Obviously, they pass on, they get divorced, etc. And then we were finding that our clients actually weren't properly implementing the structures. So what we do at iProtect specifically is, outside of just structuring through our legal firms,
Right.
we have a trustee firm called iProtect Trustees, which
Okay.
obviously administers trusts.
Okay.
And then we've got a company called iProtect Accounting, which
Okay.
actually handles the accounting side of the trust. So
Okay.
here we've got a holistic solution in that we've got a website, and obviously we produce a lot of information about trusts, etc. Where there's a need, we structure the client or the client's needs. We then support that fully in that we've got a trustee service and we've got an accounting service. And that's where we find the biggest fall down area.
Right.
Okay? Somebody sets up a trust, it goes into file 13 because they don't actually utilize it.
Right.
All right, so assets are not moved, financial planning around the trust is not properly executed and implemented.
Okay.
A lot of assets, maybe a personal residence, a holiday home, whatever the case is not looked after.
Okay.
And being a property investor, I mean, there's risk.
Absolutely.
People don't think of tenants as a risk.
Sure.
And it's insane. A tenant could sue you, and you could end up losing your home. That's
Right.
not ideal.
Right.
All right?
Just before you're actually elaborating on quite a lot there, I want to just get a little bit more, you to first of all explain what a trust is, because we've got a combination of some of our investors out there that are obviously they've got trusts, they know what it's all about, they're actually utilizing it to best effect. But now let's talk about somebody who's a kind of a novice investor, coming for the first time. Maybe just start off from that. Why a trust? Because I think that's quite important, because you've mentioned quite a lot of things there and advantages of a trust.
Cool.
But before we get there, let's go back to right to the start.
Okay, so we're putting the cart before the horse. Okay.
Absolutely, yeah.
Neil, a trust is a concept that is over 900 years old.
Okay.
And it's amazing that whenever we do a presentation or a seminar, workshop, or even a consultation,
Right.
and people fully grasp what a trust is, the lights go on and they go, wow,
Okay.
where's this, who's been hiding this entity or this information? And the bizarre thing is it's such an old entity. The way I like to explain it is that a trust is like a big security vault. It's
Right.
this huge vault.
Okay.
And that's our point of departure. Asset protection is very key for us. So we get people to think that a trust is completely distinct from you. It is this vault that we are going to create through the means of a trust deed,
Right.
which is set up by somebody called the founder, which is always the client.
Okay.
Then it's run by persons called trustees for the benefit of beneficiaries.
Right.
It's not a legal entity in the sense that it, like a company or a closed corporation is.
Okay.
Okay, so it's this hybrid, nebulous, wobbly entity that doesn't fit very nicely into a lot of legal definitions. So it is a separate person from the client, but it's not a juristic person in a normal sense, which is why there's always a lot of interesting sort of court rulings and actions around trust, because they don't fit into all the nice little compartments. But for a novice out there, just understand a trust is like a big vault that you are then going to put all of your good stuff in, and you're going to possibly have another trust that you will utilize to make your property investments. And we can maybe talk about that a little bit later in terms of compartmentalizing and ring fencing risk, etc.
Okay. All right. So that's as an investor now, I'm intrigued, and I want to know, what is the big advantage? Why would I need to set up a trust versus, say, a CC or PTY, for example? What is the main reason for going the trust route?
Okay. A trust has got certain human attributes, if I can use that analogy,
Okay.
in that a trust is not owned by anybody.
Okay.
Just like you and I, even though our spouses might think they own us, they don't really.
Yeah.
So nobody owns a trust.
Right.
Okay, so you see you've got this ring fencing, or you've got this sort of standalone entity. Now, if we
Right.
contrast that with a closed corporation or a PTY limited, CC is owned by a member.
Right.
Okay, a company is owned by a shareholder. So in the event of, let's talk about a benefit that a trust would offer, like asset protection.
Okay.
If I were to sue you,
Right.
and you're the member of a closed corporation,
Right.
I could attach your member's interest, thereby giving me access to the assets of the CC or
Right.
the company, which could be a property.
Okay.
Right, so through the back door, I slip in and I actually get access to the assets. So you don't have complete asset protection there.
Right.
Whereas if the asset is owned by the trust
Mm-hmm.
and you run into trouble, that
Mhm.
trust is completely distinct from you. So
Okay.
a creditor would not be able to utilize that backdoor principle, which I term the backdoor principle, to get access to the assets in the CC or the company, because the trust is a standalone entity.
Okay. So the main benefit would be asset protection. Let's talk a little bit about tax, accounting, that kind of stuff. I would assume that you would have to register trusts at SARS and that kind of thing. I mean, and is there tax protection? And maybe just explain a little bit about that in terms of distributions and benefits of that.
Okay. I think at this point also, before we get onto the sort of administrative and tax issues, let's talk about other benefits of trust.
Okay, fair enough.
Outside of the asset protection, which is very important for us, it's about estate planning.
Okay.
Right? So on the event
Right.
of your death, if you do not have a structure in place,
Mhm.
you're going to be heavily penalized.
Right.
Okay, you are going to pay a capital gains tax on 10%
Mm-hmm.
of the market value of the property, if you're an investor, or the assets.
Yeah.
Okay, irrespective
Mhm.
of what outstanding amounts might sort of still be on the property. So, a quick example: you buy a property for $1 million.
Mhm.
At the time of your death, the property is worth $4 million. There's a
Right.
gain there of $3 million.
Mhm.
Even if you have a mortgage of $3.5 million, it's
Mhm.
irrelevant. You're going to pay the CGT on that growth.
Right.
All right.
Right.
If you had that property in a trust,
Mhm.
you wouldn't pay any CGT.
Right.
All right.
Okay.
Also,
Great
estate-
benefit. Mm.
You've got an executive's fee of 3.5% plus VAT,
Mm.
okay, which could amount to as much as 3.99%,
Mm.
almost 4% of the gross value
Mm.
of the property.
Mm.
Again, quickly demonstrate that by way of example. Property is worth $4 million at the time of your death.
Mhm.
Okay,
Mhm.
your executor gets 3.5% plus VAT if they're a vendor of
Right.
the $4 million.
Mhm.
Okay, now look at this. You
Mhm.
might have a mortgage of $3.5 million.
Mhm.
So your equity in the property is only $500,000.
Mhm.
But the executor is still going to get 3.99% of the 4 million. So it's a
Wow.
small percentage, but a huge actual value amount, rand cent value. Then, of course, there's other scenarios like or estate duty we also need to discuss.
Mhm.
20% of any assets in excess of 3.5 million rand net
Mm.
will be attract 20% estate duty.
Right.
And we know that if you're going to be a pretty ambitious investor, that your estate
Mm.
is going to definitely exceed 3.5 million.
Absolutely.
So having all your assets in trust, you're going to ensure no capital gains taxes, no executives fees, no estate duty.
Mm. Well, it sounds like a little bit of a no-brainer to me because, I mean, essentially, I mean, people have access to your, to your assets if it's in your own name.
Correct.
They also, executives fees, tax. What about bank accounts? I mean, I suppose they get full access, they just get frozen.
No. Estate
Oh.
freezing is another benefit of a trust in your personal
No,
capacity.
I was referring in personal capacity
Absolutely,
versus the trust. Yeah. As
What we
yeah.
do is we
Mm.
call that having no access to your wallet.
Okay, right.
And we like people to conduct a little experiment personally. I mean, have you ever left your wallet at home?
Oh, yeah.
A hell of an interesting day, eh?
Yeah.
You rush out and you go stop at the garage to get yourself a quick drink or a little something to eat, and you get to the counter and you're already gobbled off with your salmi, and you can't find your wallet. Now imagine not having access to funds or cash for 6 months, a year. Okay, the average very small estate is about a year to wind up.
Mhm.
As an investor, it's going to be a lot more complicated because you've got
Mm.
properties. Okay, that could drag this thing out for 2-3 years.
Mm.
Do you want to do that to your family, your spouse, your dependents, maybe even granny, etc.?
Mm.
By having the assets in a trust,
Right.
you ensure that there's immediate access to the assets, because the trust, as I mentioned earlier, is completely distinct from you,
Mhm.
which means that whoever your dependents, beneficiaries have got immediate access to the cash.
Right.
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 And
Now
then-
that's a great benefit.
It's huge.
Okay. Any other benefits before we
Definitely.
get to the administrative side and to
Okay,
the
let's talk
tax side?
about
Yeah.
continuity.
Mhm.
All right, we always sort of really laugh about this. I mean, if my grandfather had
Mhm.
gone out and bought 50 properties, I
Mm.
probably wouldn't be sitting here talking to you.
Sure.
I'd be on my yacht sipping pina coladas. But the
Sure.
reality is, if you don't have a proper structure in place, what happens to most people is because there's a huge CGT, estate duty, capital gains, executives fees, coupled with the potential that there could be mortgages on properties. And as
Right.
a property investor, we all
Mm.
know that You use gearing quite extensively,
Sure.
possibly.
Sure.
I mean, some people are more conservative, some people are more aggressive. But the reality is, on the event of your death, your estate cannot have any debt. So your executor needs to wipe out any mortgages, which results in most portfolios coming to naught.
Sure.
So after 20, 30, 40, 50-year period, you've accumulated a huge portfolio which comes to naught because your beneficiaries can't take over your mortgages.
Yeah.
Whereas if it's structured in a trust, the trust doesn't die. And again, the event of your death will not have an impact on the trust. So for so long as the trust can service the debt, that portfolio remains intact. Very, very good. Another quick example would be a commercial property. There we're talking about big numbers.
Sure.
And the property could be owned in an individual's name, and let's assume it's a 100 million rand building, bringing in 500,000 rand revenue streams, for instance. Okay. If your family cannot take over the mortgage on that property, you've actually sold them out of a income-producing asset, because on the event of your death, they can't come up with a big mortgage. Maybe they don't qualify.
Right.
Now contrast that with the scenario. If we acquire the commercial property into a trust, or alternatively, it's into a company owned by trust. Okay. We've got, depending on the circumstances, we'll talk about what structure is relevant. But in that case, the property is not held in the individual's name.
Right.
So the death of the individual will have no bearing on the productivity and the income streams that can be generated for the family and for the future, sort of in perpetuity if necessary.
No, absolutely. Okay, to say, I know there's not a lot of time that we've got. Just expand a little bit more on the tax side and administrative side, because I think that's quite important,
Crucial, critical,
and obviously, and typical. I mean, I would be asking, if I'm a novice, how much is it going to cost me? That kind of stuff. Maybe you don't have to say exactly. Maybe you can give some estimates in terms of how to run a trust.
How to work. Okay.
Yeah.
From a tax perspective, we would advise each and every single investor to absolutely get good advice on the tax status of their investments, because there could be a serious downside if you're not using the correct vehicles.
Sure.
There is a section in our Income Tax Act which ring fences losses.
Right.
Now, as any astute investor will know, even for the novice, you are going to be carrying substantial losses on your property investments for a number of years. You might hit break even 7-year, 8-year. If you're using aggressive refinancing or gearing methodologies, it could be even longer.
Sure.
So if the property is owned in your personal capacity, you could find that the losses that have been accumulating could be disallowed against future income earned. So that only applies to individuals in their personal capacity.
Right.
If you were to acquire your investment properties into a trust, you've got no problem. That section won't affect you.
Okay.
All right. Also, the trust has got the following benefits from a tax perspective. In the event that a distribution is ever made from a trust, it doesn't attract donations tax. A lot of people don't know that.
Right.
Right? So let's assume you need to look after your gran, or you want to send mom on a nice worldwide cruise and it costs 500,000. If you were to do that out of liberality or generosity out of your heart, it's going to cost you a 20% donations tax.
Sure.
However, if mom is a beneficiary of the trust can pick up her worldwide cruise bill and not pick up the donations tax. Okay, so there's something called the conduit principle, which allows for the income of the trust to feed through the trust and actually get taxed in the hands of the beneficiaries.
Right.
And this is where trusts start to become very tax efficient.
Okay.
It's in terms of Section 25 of the Income Tax Act. It says any income earned by the trust will be taxed in the trust, or alternatively, the trustees have got the election to distribute that income to beneficiaries, who then pay the tax in their personal hands at their marginal rate. So there's a big fallacy, I believe, where people think that because trusts have got the highest flat rate of tax, that it's the worst entity or the worst position tax entity.
Right.
If you utilize the conduit principle correctly, all right, you could find that you're no worse off from a tax position than you would have been had you had the asset or the income in your own hands. Do you agree?
Sure, absolutely.
Because my top marginal tax rate could be 40%.
Sure.
The trust is also 40%. Now, if I have 10 children, which is probably one of the only reasons to have 10 children.
Right.
And again, depending on whether they're minors or majors, could have a bearing on certain anti-avoidance provisions. But that aside, just to try and simplify it, if you made 100,000 rand income in the trust, it would be taxed at 40%. However, you've got the ability to distribute that income to the beneficiaries, and they pay at their marginal tax rates. Anybody currently earning less than 54,200 pays zero.
Okay.
So if I had that 100,000, I could split that between my wife, maybe, who's not working, and one of my children, and I'm paying zero tax. So you see, I can be efficiently used. One must just be cautious not to fall foul of the anti-avoidance provisions.
Okay. So that's great. Now I need to administrate that and execute it. Do you have a service that does that kind of thing?
Absolutely. As I mentioned earlier in our interview here, iProtect was born out of a need to actually solve that problem.
Okay.
Because there are a lot of people who set up trusts these days. It's not a regulated environment. It is a contract, but unfortunately they're not always drafted by attorneys.
Sure.
Even though I am one for my sins. The reality is there are a lot of people doing good work out there, bringing good awareness about trusts, and they set up very good documents, but there's also, unfortunately, with the good comes the bad and the ugly.
Sure.
And we often will conduct legal audits on trusts, and we see the most horrendous things. But the biggest fall down is not so much in the setting up of a trust. That's the easy part.
Okay.
The difficult part is the actual administering of the trust. Okay, making sure the correct resolutions have been done. Have you done your financials? Has the trust been registered with SARS where necessary? All the housekeeping, as I call it. Okay, that's where the fall down is. And at iProtect, we've got a trustee division which handles that, and we've got an accounting division which also helps clients to then pull all of that together. And that is the most crucial part, because you've got to do the numbers. In terms of the Act, you actually have to produce a set of financials, and a lot of people know that. You don't have to audit a trust, depending on what your deed says. Some people will have a deed that says you must audit, but there's no necessity to do that. But you do have to prepare a set of financials.
Absolutely.
And that's where the fall down is. And our accounting division helps clients actually put their assets into trust. They help them to actually fulfill their obligations in terms of compliance, whether statutorily, tax-wise, or in any other format.
Okay, great. Lastly, there's been a lot of negative sort of coverage about trusts in terms of sham trusts and whether people are trying to hide assets and that kind of stuff, specifically coming from the authorities like SARS and FICA and what have you. And you know, there's been a bit of noise in terms of it's almost like you're trying to hide something, or you're going to try to do illegal activity. Can you maybe just kill that myth out there, because it's almost made to feel that if you own a trust, you're some kind of criminal.
You're basically seen as a leper, absolutely. And Neale, this is one of the myths that I really love dispelling, because we see SARS as actually a marketing agent for us, because we fully believe in compliance. And if the next time any of your viewers or subscribers go out and have a look and read the articles that are actually posted or put out by SARS, they will see that it actually relates to serious delinquents. They've been naughty. Okay, and because SARS doesn't have the capacity to regulate thousands and thousands of trusts, they are a private document, so it's not that SARS can go online like they can with a CC or company.
Sure.
The trust is a private document. So SARS can't go online and say, hey, Neale Petersen's got 10 trusts or 1 trust. So it's difficult to police. So this is why there's this big anti-sentiment.
Right.
Okay, because there's a number of fronts that SARS loses out on. On the one instance, if you are putting income-producing assets into a trust, which trust is not disclosing that income, and now that's tax evasion, which is criminal, and obviously punishable in a range of manners.
Right.
The fiscus loses out on income tax that is not being collected, possibly even VAT. Okay, and a range of other taxes. Okay, so SARS is obviously trying to flush this out to some degree. But if you are complying with the Income Tax Act and doing all the necessary bits and pieces that you have to from an administrative compliance perspective, SARS is happy and they cannot touch you from that perspective. So they're really gunning for the delinquents and persons who are not complying with their tax obligations. So I just implore your viewers and subscribers next time round, read the article and you'll see, hey, it's Bobby Jones, bad boy, stuck away 50 million rand asset, and he's now been caught and punished. The rest of us law-abiding, tax compliant citizens now freak out and our paranoia buttons get set off and we think that we're under the radar, but that's not the case. Okay, we actually advocate and promote compliance, and there is no reason to try and avoid income tax. And if you set up your structures correctly, in fact, there'll be very few instances where you have an income tax issue at all.
Right.
So we view trust as a vault, as I mentioned earlier, and we're only putting assets in there. Some of those assets might produce income, like a property, but there's ways of obviously minimizing any taxation using the conduit principle, assessing or setting off assessed losses that might have accumulated over the period, etc. So property investing and utilizing trust can make this a really tax efficient exercise.
Jose, it's really been fascinating chatting to you. I know we've run out of a bit of time, gone a little bit over our limit that we normally do, but I'm sure this won't be the last time that we will have discussions. Just for our viewers and readers out there who are certainly intrigued about setting up a trust, how do they get hold of you as a company, iProtect? Do you want to maybe just give us your
contact details? Sure.
Yes, yeah.
Okay, we can go to our website, www.iprotect.co.za, or alternatively you can phone our office line on 08610 87878. We are nationally based, so we can assist your readers or subscribers anywhere in the country. We've got an office in Pretoria, Joburg, Cape Town, and Durban.
Fantastic.
So we've got a nice sort of national presence.
Great. Well, Jose, thank you very much for being on the show, and to our investors out there, prosperous investing.